Sorry. Good morning, everybody. So the kind of the start to this is more crop per drop. And, you know, the agriculture industry is no different than any other industry. We want to make it bigger, better, stronger, faster. And that translates to every industry you can think of. Kitchens want more meals coming out. Restaurants want more seats at the table. Show business wants more content to get out there. Every industry wants to figure out how to get more production out of what they have. And agriculture is right there with it. The difference for us, though, is there's a lot of pieces that are out of the control. You know, farmers for years have been trying to figure out ways to manage light, water, weather, land, and it's only been in the last decade that we've started to truly manage the climate capacities for it, the variables that go into making crops not necessarily faster, but get better and greater yields out of it. And those are the pieces that technology is starting to kind of take us that path. The path and the direction for this ends up being, we get limited to what we can do, but they've tried different ways to achieve the same objectives. But when we get to it, it gets down to creating profitabilities through efficiencies as well as proficiencies. For agriculture, technology's kind of not visited that industry very much. Really, since the refrigerated rail car, and take a moment to think when that was. We got refrigeration in the 30s and 40s. The refrigerated rail car was kind of around that same time. The technology towards food, agriculture, and the production thereof wasn't about getting it bigger, better, stronger, faster. It was about getting it to market. And all the different ways that that's happened, whether it's refrigeration, packaging, and using chemical enhancements, whether that be gassing or stabilizing the product to get to market. Only in the most recent years have we started taking technology and applying it in different ways. Over the last years, it's CEA, Controlled Environment Agriculture, has came to fashion. And that's to feed this growing planet and growing population that we currently have. How are we going to do that? Well, GMOs, genetically modified foods, kind of got a little bit of a bad rap because most crops in some form have a seed that's been GMO'd. And when we talk about that, grape growers have taken rootstock and graft on another type of grape on top of that to not take so long to generate new crop. Is that genetically modifying it? There's an argument there. But it doesn't always end up in a negative result. The negative result of a GMO modified food is how will at that core structure, molecular structure, how does that affect the consumption of it? And there's a couple of crops out there, we're going to remain nameless, that have done it and kind of hurt us a little bit. But for the most part, it's taken a wrong direction. And is that really implementing technology, or is that still just kind of changing a little bit of what we're trying to do? The direction for technology that is now taking us is how we've been able to do more inside. The lighting that was, the lighting that we use now today isn't even close. I have 5-year-old farms that I'm trying to get new lighting technology in now because how bright, how energy efficient it can be, and it changes now I am starting to grow bigger and better because the brilliance of the lighting is able to increase crop yield. Water we're not making more water at this point, but we can do a lot to it. We can clean it better. We can take out pathogens. We can take out undesirables. We can also add. by adding, there's three basic elements to most fertilizers, and by adding those basic elements in the right mixture at various times throughout the crop cycle, we are growing bigger, better, stronger, faster. Now it comes down to the trick and this is where technology starts to get really sexy. For years, we've had the ability to read the waters. And we can easily tell you the temperature of the water. We can easily tell you the acidic content through a pH reading. Hell, you can do that in pools, right? But the only way to measure nutrients has been what's called electric conductivity, EC. The problem with reading just one reading like that, electric conductivity, is that you don't get to truly see what's in the water. Now, through new technologies that are being developed as we speak, we're getting ourselves into a position where we can monitor the water and tell you exact down to the nutrients of potassium, nitrates, nitrogen, and phosphates as to what's in the water, live, all the time. We've had the ability to take that water, ship it off to a lab, get it and come back, but folks, that takes a long time. By that time, half my crop cycle's over. I didn't gain anything. The collaboration I'm currently working with the University of Florida, with a couple other container farm manufacturers, and also an up-and-coming startup called Invonics, we're now looking at meters that are being built that will read each one of those items individually, and we're able to then adjust at the time to increase a little potassium at the right time, a little nitrogen at the right time. And that will then not necessarily make it faster, but we're going to increase our yields and measurements, not like 5 and 10%, but we could be talking about yields increasing up to 20 and 30%. Now let's go back to reflect to those other industries. Doesn't showbiz, what would showbiz do if they could increase content 20 to 30%? What is every kitchen now is trying to figure out how to get a ghost kitchen in to increase meals coming out at 20 to 30% out of the same place. Well, that's where we would be. And that's the first time that's been able to be. One of the struggles with not being in a controlled environment is that I have a family farm where my cousin farms in Rushville, Indiana. And I asked him, I said, so what crop are you planting at what time? He goes, well, we have a window of about a week and a half to seed 300 acres. Let that sink in for a minute. And if it rains a little bit too much and the soils aren't just right, he doesn't plant. And I was like, I kind of said, well, so what do you do? And I grew up on a farm, so what do you do? Tom, we just skipped that cycle. We have to wait. My heart fell on the floor. I was like, wow. You can't just start it up again? You can't wait 2 weeks? No, because then it bumps off the next crop cycle. I have a luxury where my farming works more like a bakery model. I very much shared the Monrovia Bakery as well as the La Rose Bakery, where I put ingredients in and it comes back out. And I get to control every aspect of it. It's like a spa for plants. I get to control air temperature, which air temperature then allows me to control how long it can stay at a certain point. I also get to control CO2 emissions, which will help me increase crop size. I can control lighting, where now my crop cycle, maybe I'm trying to push it a little bit more and we start growing from 12 hours to 18 hours, 22 hours, depending upon where it is at what point in the growth life cycle of the plant. We're now also taking in the next phase of the technology and starting to put it in place throughout the throughout the life cycle of the plant, where at the very early age of what would be germination up to seedling, it only needs X amount of light, it only needs certain temperatures, and then for the next 2 weeks of its life cycle, it would increase with light and coolness, and then at the end of its life cycle, we can change the nutrients to move it up and increase it through potassium and nitrogen and gain an additional 15 to 20% of growth at the last 2 to 3 weeks of its life cycle. My cousin Tom Mahan in Indiana can't do that. So I'm kind of spoiled by that. So the technology allows us to give a lot more monitoring as to what we can do exactly with the life cycle of the plant. But with technology, hey, wait, there's more. The technology allows us, my good man Neil, can you run that again? Just let it ride. The technology now allows us to put it anywhere. I first got into container farming thinking that I would eventually move into a building. Listen, you're going to drag me kicking and screaming out of the modules, out of the containers now. I can't imagine what it would be like when you start talking to places like AeroFarm and Bowery and such. Those are some of the larger indoor grow places. They have to cool CO2, buildings bigger than this, to maintain that. Wow, that's tough. And then what about the fact if a pest does get in? Well, how much does that have to cover? You see those folks, and they're working in there like they're working in an operating room. The cleanliness, the sterility, to maintain every little aspect of it. Well, okay, we have to have those same policies in place. We had a conversation yesterday about food safety and protocols, and I'm very much an advocate for it. That being said, if I have an issue on one farm, it doesn't hit me on all my farms. One container, I can isolate it, I can manage it. If I have an issue with a certain crop in one farm, I can isolate it, I can manage it. That's what the technology allows me to do now. We're in South Florida. Well, South Florida is a pretty happy area for agriculture. We have a lot of sun, we get a lot of rain. We do have a grow season which is opposite that of the northern growing season. However, there is a downtime. Well, not for me. Again, I go back to I'm more like a bakery model. Ingredients go in, and my product comes out. And it comes out where I harvest twice a week, every week, for the whole year. So there's a consistency to what I can do, and there is the ability to put this hyper-local. Wind, water, sand, and surf, doesn't matter. We can put this anywhere, and we do. On the slides at one point you saw some of the places where we have co-locations, and we're going to have more co-locations. And when you start thinking of this application, well then the mind just goes. Yeah, we can put it in Minnesota where there's snow. Actually, it's very popular in the Rust Belt, where Ithaca, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, it's kind of where I got the idea because I watched some of these guys get some money, and then they went into these old factories and started putting greenhouses on top. Where else can it go? Have you seen a lot of island nations with thriving farms? Not really. Well, now not only can we start putting them in island nations for the people, but for commerce and tourism. You know, we have co-locations at a resort. We look to have, we're starting to have conversations with the the Secretary of Agriculture at Jamaica. If we're able to establish 4 to 12 farms, well, now that the capacity that starts having, every one container farm grows 4 acres of food. Every one container farm grows 4 acres of food. If you had a chance to enjoy our colleagues' presentation at the beginning of the week, if you ate on a plant-based diet, 3 acres, 2 acres fed 14 people or families. The math just starts going. And again, it's year-round all the time. The technology allows us to get us hyper-local. And how does that affect the climate change? Well, you're still running on power, Smitherman. Well, hopefully not for long. We spoke about the advances of solar technology. That's going to come into play here. Farmers have been trying to work the energy of the sun for a long time. Now, hopefully, we're going to be able to work the energy of the sun and become energy farmers as well. And that really does just completely erase the carbon footprint. I use approximately 2 gallons of water a day for what would be 4 acres. 2 gallons of water a day for what would be 4 acres. We're not making any more water, but we recycle it. We're able to drip through, keep it in our reservoir tank, and cycle it through again. Solar, if we're able to capture that, and it's not like the energy use is tremendous now. One container farm for us in Florida our energy bill runs about $350 a month, which is that of a mid-size home. Excuse me? Per container. Per container. One container per month, about $350, give or take. Maybe a little more in the summer. Most of that, it splits about 50-50 from climate control to lighting, as far as how that energy bill gets split up. But that has with it being a nominal amount, that has the ability to be solared. Now, the challenges, and my good friend, the distiller in the back, said earlier that the question was arise: can we get solar to be moved forward in technology? I believe it will be, and I believe it will be very quickly. There's great minds trying to figure that out now. I haven't taken that path yet because I'm still trying to figure this out. But I think that the direction will be through battery application as well, and trying to make that more cost efficient. But that's coming. That's easily coming. So as technology starts to take away all the challenges that agriculture's had, we have the ability to manage the water, the nutrients that the plants get. We have the ability to manage the lighting, what the sun gives us. And then at the last part, we have the ability to put this where we want it to be. We have started our world in a place called Overtown, which is in Miami. Overtown is a economically deprived area. It's filled with black and brown people and always has been. It is a historically a black community with a lot of pride. It's very similar. It's often referred to as the Harlem of the South. When the days of Lucille Ball and Frank Sinatra and such were entertaining and enjoying themselves at Fontainebleau on South Beach, the musicians that played for them would often come back to Overtown because they weren't allowed to stay there. So there was a vibrant community that was diminished as a highway was built through it. There's a revitalization that's going on there. And it is a revitalization, it's not a regentrification. And we have ambitions to be able to bring manufacturing back to the urban environment. And that's one of our biggest challenges right now, is every hydroponic farmer I employ, I have to build. It's pretty challenging to run an ad in the paper and try and get one. Just about everybody here can run an ad in the paper for a person they're looking to hire. You need a line cook. You need a salesperson. You need somebody in social media now. That's a thriving job. As we have to build these people, we've now started another incubation project on the property called Right Now for Today. Right Now for Today is a vocational training program as well as a food bank. This was something that COVID brought to us because as I was struggling, as we all were struggling to try and figure out the next move during COVID, as I spoke to financing, every time that came out, I said, oh, everything looks great if you're only a nonprofit. About the fourth time I heard that, I was like, so you're telling me I need to have a nonprofit? We started one. It's on its way. We have our first apprentice program starting in Overtown for hydroponic farming in July. We hope for that to scale and be able to move forward with that as well. But my point to that is, now everywhere that Hammock Greens goes, not only inside Miami or inside Florida, we're having conversations as we've just achieved a relationship with Cisco, and the idea, again, spawned out of COVID to not circumvent the distribution chain and this food supply chain, but insert ourselves into it. The number one way that this technology affects climate change isn't necessarily the farming practices, but it's because of the locality. Again, bringing it back into the marketplace. Let's go back to the refrigerator rail car. They've been trying, the infamous they've been trying to be able to stabilize and transport it. Well, 80% of the greens are grown in Yuma and Central Valley of California, Yuma, Arizona. That's trucked everywhere. That's the emissions. That's the carbon footprint. That's the part that, and then of course, let's not escape the nutritional value with that too. So it's being trucked across, harvested, and folks, most foods, they're not made to go get cut off from their life support and then be trucked for the first 7 to 10 days. Everybody agrees how wonderful it is to get that fresh farm. Well, let's put the farms in the towns. Let's put the farms right in the towns. Let's grow there. Our crops now aren't just leafy greens. We're growing carrots, radishes, soon to have mushrooms. Right behind that, we're going to do strawberries. And my partner's sitting at the table, and he doesn't know it, but we're also going to start doing beekeeping and honey. That relationship with FreshPoint, though, now allows us, in the ambition, to be able to, everywhere that there's a FreshPoint or a Cisco warehouse, we're able to establish an agri-tech park that will have shipping containers with farms inside of them, a nonprofit providing vocational training, trying to start developing the farmer inside the urban and also manufacturing inside the urban population. Where the food needs to be eaten is where it should be grown. So when we talk about what technology has done, we grow bigger, better, stronger, faster. We grow where we want, when we want. And this absolutely affects not just the consumers, but it also affects the all facets of the food chain, meaning the restaurants, the chefs, and where it can be. I got about 7 minutes here. Any questions from the audience at this point? Yes, please.
What does it cost to convert a shipping container into a farm?
A lot of money. Right, no, I appreciate it. So the path that we do, I'd like to say that I'm not a shipping container farm manufacturer, and that I'm a hot rodder. I bought, and I'm going to answer your question, but it's going to go through a path here. I bought the first one new, and I kind of paid, I feel like I overpaid to begin with, and that overpayment was kind of my tuition, right? Now that'll help teach me how to do it. And then every one after that, I buy used. I buy the containers used, so at a much more reduced rate. So because I have the knowledge I have, I'm able to go in, and like a hot rodder, I strip it out, I add this, and I make it go faster, and here we go. So you notice the investment model. The way that we have and I'm sorry, I wanted to hit this one real quick. This is what I think will be in the future. We'll have clusters of farms stacked upon each other, and now there's also a conversation being had that possibly providing housing in this as well. 200,000 is what it would cost to get it in place in 90 days, cash flow positive. And I say that's kind of if I do it, because my learning curve's already gone and my compliance is already in place. So you can get them for less. I doubt that you will not spend the money I'm talking about, though. So because you're going to have a learning curve to get through. Did I get there with that question?
I have two shipping containers that I'm getting out of. They were storage for our business. We moved to a bigger business. That's coming in my presentation in about 5 minutes. So we've got two shipping containers that I was going to just turn around and sell or try and figure out what to do with. One of the things that we wanted to do was do a food bank. So we were going to offer it up to a food bank so that they could have that. They could have their refrigerated. One of the shipping containers is refrigerated, so I was going to offer them that to have their cold storage. But this, to me, sounds a lot better use of my shipping containers than turning them into storage.
The equipment on the installation and equipment and such runs depending upon how customizable you are and what crops you want to grow, because again, I'm growing different crops, and there's most of the manufacturers out there right now are making these so that you can grow green leafy vegetables. As I mentioned, the different things I'm doing, each one really does depend on that. It depends on the interior build out depends on the crop I grow. And with that interior build out and the crop I grow, there's a scale portion of this too. Meaning, if you're going to do it to where you do all facets, germination, seedling, and come to full harvest, you won't be able to get the yields that I get because I have modularized what I do, and so I do all germinations for all the farms in one. I do, in the farms that I'm growing green leafy vegetables, I go from nose to tail. I make it very difficult for anybody to work in there. They tell me all the time, but I get more crop out of it. So there's some challenges with it. It has to be you need the insulation though, so it would have to be a refrigerated container. Anyone else? Please. She's running up to you.
Yes, I know that there's a lot of news right now about the microbiome that's in the soil and how plants work with the microbiome that's in the soil in a collaborative fashion to, draw minerals that the plant needs and then put, kind of reestablish the soil. And I've also heard the soils are dying all over the world because of the way farming is being done right now. Is there any focus in your process here on introducing those same kind of naturally found microbiome flora in the soil into your hydroponics?
The short answer is no. But I want to kind of walk through unpack your question, because you spoke about conventional farming. I want to be real clear that as I speak about the future, that I am not faulting agribusiness. That there's a lot of brethren out there that are trying to feed a hungry world. All right, it's going to take currently we grow crops backwards. In earlier conversations, we talked about farm subsidies. We've talked about local crop getting to market. A major challenge is the direction of what crops should be grown commodity-wise is being directed to them, not just by market, but by government direction. And once that crop is grown, i.e. soy, corn, wheat, et cetera, how that crop gets to market and where that market is, whether it's domestic or international, kind of affirms what's going to be grown. And then lastly to that little part of it is that crops are, then it's pushed to the food producers to figure out what to do with that crop. You know, at one point, Joe spoke about how the prison institutions get fed better and more nutritious meals than the schools do. Well, because the direction of agriculture was to farm soy, they figured out how to make soy burgers long before Beyond Meat. And that was a fact put in place because the crop was grown. So, but back to your idea of the diminishment of soils. I have a lot of ability to control the water of what happens to the plants. So I can fine tune it down to just the very, micro dosing of what goes in the water. Because of that, it also works as a double-edged sword. Because everything we do is harnessed on the water, and that's what provides all the nutrition, if we miss that, we can damage it very quickly. So, and on average, the plant's life cycle will react 7 days after if, say, the pH got too high. Well, we can adjust the pH correctly. You can't readjust it and get it back right. But if you just get it back to right, 7 days later, the plant will recover. In soil is very forgiving. So because soil acts as the grow medium, if you have a drought, it provides the right amount. If you have a flood, it provides the right amount. It becomes very forgiving. But how well we treat the soil in agriculture is very important. Crop cycles fall where you'll put in a crop and then you'll put in a crop behind it that you will harvest and then turn into the soil to add nutrients back in organically. That is not a newer practice. That's a practice that is being encouraged more and more as opposed to the chemical fertilizers of the past or straight putting nitrogen into the ground or potassiums because of what is now being understood in the tech side of what microbial benefits or reactions happen. I don't want to speak on behalf of the conventional farmers that are out there that are trying to do it right because they are shepherds to the land. That's where their world is, and that's what they have to kind of work with. I can tell you this. Farmers don't want the soil to be diminished. They don't want to take away from the earth. They want the earth to be whole and be able to provide out of that. So the toxification of soils really comes from the herbicides and pesticides. That's the challenge, the overwhelming challenge that they have that's out of their control, and that's what they have to combat it with. They are working towards trying to figure out how to use natural pestilence, but if I have an aphid problem, which is a pest that bothers green leafy vegetables, I in turn loose ladybugs into the farm, but I'm contained. So they don't eat my plants, they only eat the aphids, and they kind of crop cycle through just like a crop does. I know that there are vineyards and other crops that use ladybugs, but I mean, they can't use them as long as I do, they fly away. So it's a challenge that I know that is of great interest of how to maintain and shepherd the soil. I would hate to say that farmers are doing the bad thing to it, of not providing to it, but I think that they want to. Anyone else? Yes, please.
So, I don't know if this is on. Can you hear me okay? So to address your question and as well as your response, which I think is great, thank you. I think there's a pressure on farmers. So I grew up on a grain and beef cattle farm in North Dakota. way more years now than I care to admit, but, and watching my dad struggles even in the 70s, trying to do rotation to enrich the soil. He was one of the few at the time that was winning conservation awards for that type of practice. But, now you look at farming in North Dakota, and there's a financial driver there that I don't think we can underestimate. And so I think that, saying that the farmers are trying, I think many of them still are. My dad's long since retired now, but, they have that drive too of, we need to get the yields, we need to make a living. And as farm equipment goes up, as putting a crop in the ground, the costs go up for that too. That is an influence that, that is real with that. And so hearing your presentation today, so thank you very much for that. I think that this really opens up a lot of opportunities. I think also in thinking about it, in the question about the microbiome, so, I'm trained as a biochemist and a clinical pharmacologist, and I've worked in chronic diseases for 35 years. And then now have switched over to focus on nutrition and food choices for not only overall health, but sustainability. And yes, the microbiome is a very important issue in the soil with that. But hearing your discussion today, there's a lot of things that we could also do in regions of the world where there are nutritional deficiencies, where the soil is not going to be able to recover in a time frame that allows for overall health. You're able to do that. And yes, it takes some refinement and it's going to take some experimentation there, but I would encourage you to not only partner with everyone within the food and agricultural industry, but think about the partnerships in healthcare, because I think that's really where the future is going to be as far as addressing some of those things and being able to leverage these new technologies and techniques.
Thank you. And I believe that what we're learning, the way to help the farmer, the conventional farmer, is through irrigation, correct irrigation, and being able to, which is expensive. When you start talking about large farms and trying to irrigate large farms, the way that they irrigate right now, and I'm kind of speaking to the choir, is through large canals. Well, surface water is a challenge to work with. So the mechanization for years for farmers took them from multi-farm hand farms to single farm hands. Hence, you mentioned the equipment. I don't want to make it sound like technology has abandoned it, but it was always more towards bigger mechanization. And that bigger mechanization was really became a financial tool and a financial play. When you speak specifically to technology to the food, the technology to the food can help tremendously, but there'll be an initial upfront expense that to get the farms correctly irrigated to be able to not just increase crop yield, but to not take from the earth, but to give back to the earth. I think that kind of meant it. And then I couldn't agree with you more. I kind of breezed over the nutritional side of this, but everything that I strive to do is to grow pesticide-free, herbicide-free. Folks, those are poisons. And I try to deliver a live product. So the shelf life, meaning with the root ball still intact on the plant. By doing that, my shelf life is tremendous. If my plants are able to go into refrigeration with the root ball on, you can easily get 2 weeks before you need to use it. There's that factor. The idea of nutrition from a live plant is, I don't have the numbers to give it to you exactly, but the nutritional value of a live plant next to a harvested plant is upwards of 60 to 70%. And for those of you who are in the audience, and I speak of this with food production, I have a history of my background was I was a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America. I worked for some of the old great chefs, Daniel Boulud, David Boulay, Jean-Louis Paladin, and the food was different for what is being out there today. Not better, not worse, different. Most cuisines, French, Chinese, Italian, were born out of poverty. and you learned how to make the food right. That being said, if those old men were able to get what the availability of what's here today, it would be amazing. Microgreens, to me, has replaced chopped parsley on the plate. The part that no one really knows, and I bet my new scientist friend knows, the microgreen is the best, highest nutritional value you can have. It has upwards of 40% more nutrients than any plant you could put on the plate. 40% more, that's not an exaggeration. If you think about it with that sprouting effect and where the nutrients is in the sprout, think of it as almost like the same tremendous nutritional value that stem cells have. It's right at that birth point, right when it's coming out. So it couldn't be more. Anyone else? Because I'm way over on time. I appreciate everyone's attention. We're available. I'd love to chat with all of you. I have enjoyed the Food 2.0 conference. I think being able to be next to innovators and listen to everyone has been fantastic, and it's been a real honor to speak to you. Thank you.